My daughter-in-law told everyone I had dementia, filed for conservatorship, froze my accounts. I sat quietly through all of it. Then my neurologist walked into the courtroom, 12 years of cognitive tests in his hands, 94th percentile. Your Honor. Her lawyer froze. The medical records she submitted. Wait, let's start from where it hurts the most. Just imagine, you're sitting in a courtroom. You're wearing the same gray blazer you wore to your wife's funeral 3 years ago, because it still fits, and because, honestly, who has time to go shopping when your daughter-in-law has frozen every account attached to your name? You can't buy groceries. You can't pay your electric bill. You can't even fill your gas tank without asking your brother to spot you like you're 22 years old again and broke between paychecks. And the worst part? Everyone in that courtroom thinks you're losing your mind. Everyone except you. My name is Eugene Tate. I'm 62 years old. I spent 34 years designing flight navigation systems for commercial aircraft. I am the kind of man who catches errors in spreadsheets for fun. I do the Sunday crossword in pen, not because I'm arrogant, because I've never needed to erase anything. And for 8 months, I sat quietly while my daughter-in-law tried to bury me alive. This is how it started. My son Kevin married Brittany Schaefer 6 years ago, late October, up in Asheville, North Carolina. Beautiful wedding, mountain backdrop, crisp fall air, the whole thing. I paid for most of it, which I mention not to be bitter, but because it becomes relevant later. It's always relevant later. I liked Brittany at first. She was sharp, confident. The kind of woman who walked into a room and immediately understood the power dynamics. I remember thinking, good, Kevin needs someone with a spine. My son is brilliant, but soft in ways I probably made him. I spent too many years being the quiet, steady one at home, and I think he absorbed that a little too well. Brittany worked as a medical office administrator for a practice in Charlotte. She knew insurance codes, patient records, billing procedures. She could talk medical terminology at a dinner table and make it sound completely casual. I thought it was impressive. I understand now that I was watching someone case the building and calling it a tour. The first hint came about 2 years into their marriage. Thanksgiving dinner at their house in the Dilworth neighborhood of Charlotte. Nice house. The kind of house that costs more than it should and is decorated to impress people who weren't invited. Brittany asked me, very sweetly, over sweet potato casserole, whether I had a financial advisor or whether I just managed everything myself. I told her I had a guy I'd worked with for years. She nodded, smiled, and changed the subject to something about Kevin's fantasy football team. I didn't think about it again. I should have written it down. Then came the documentation. I didn't know about it at the time. I found out later, piece by piece, like pulling a thread that just keeps coming and coming until you realize it was holding the whole thing together. For 2 years, Brittany had been keeping a log. Dates, times, little notes. Eugene forgot what he ordered at dinner. Eugene called me by the wrong name. Eugene repeated a story he'd already told. Eugene seemed agitated and confused when we discussed finances. Every single entry was a lie, an exaggeration, or a moment stripped so completely of context that it became unrecognizable. The one about the wrong name, I called her Carolyn once. Carolyn was my wife of 31 years who had been dead for 14 months at that point. I think I'm allowed one moment. The one about the restaurant order, I changed my mind between the appetizer and the entree. I wanted the salmon instead of the steak. Apparently, that's a symptom now. The agitation about finances. She asked me, for the 3rd time in one evening, whether I had a will and who the executor was. I told her it was none of her business. I stand by that. But I didn't know any of this was being written down. I was just living my life in my paid-off house in Cornelius, about 20 minutes north of Charlotte, right on Lake Norman. 3 bedrooms I didn't need. A dock I sat on every morning with coffee. crossword puzzles, chess online, monthly dinners with my brother Walter, annual cognitive testing with my neurologist, Dr. Norman Pruitt, which I'd been doing since a minor TIA 4 years earlier, just to keep tabs on things. Every year, same tests, same results, perfectly intact. I did not know that somewhere across town, Brittany Schaefer was building a paper case to prove otherwise. The intervention happened on a Sunday in March, cold for Charlotte. That kind of gray, drizzling early spring that makes everything look like it's reconsidering itself. Kevin called and asked if I'd come for dinner. Said the whole family would be there. I brought a bottle of wine and a pound cake from the bakery on Catawba, because I'm the kind of father who still brings things. I walked into the living room and felt it immediately. That specific silence that only exists when a group of people have been talking about you and just stopped. Kevin was on the couch. His sisters Jenna and Maureen were there, which surprised me, because they live in Virginia and Tennessee respectively. Their husbands were in the corner, looking at the floor, like the floor had personally wronged them. And Walter was there, my own brother, sitting with his hands folded in his lap, not meeting my eyes. Brittany was standing near the fireplace. She was holding a folder. I looked at that folder, and something cold moved through my chest. They told me they were worried. They said I'd been showing signs. They used words like confused and disoriented and declining. Kevin talked. Jenna talked. Brittany talked the most. She had that folder open, and she was reading from it, calmly, professionally, like she was presenting quarterly earnings and not dismantling her father-in-law's identity. I tried to respond. Every time I spoke, she talked over me, not aggressively, softly, redirecting, speaking for me, finishing my thoughts incorrectly, turning to the others with this expression that said, "See what I mean? He's doing it right now." I looked at Kevin. He was staring at the carpet. I looked at Walter. He finally looked up, and what I saw on his face wasn't suspicion of Brittany. It was pity. For me, that was the moment I understood how thoroughly I had been prepared for this room. I drove home in the rain. I sat in my car in the driveway for a while. I didn't go inside immediately because I didn't want to go inside and be alone with what had just happened. I told myself it would blow over. I told myself Kevin would come to his senses. I told myself Brittany had good intentions, or at least that she believed her own story. I was wrong on all 3 counts. But that's the thing about being a person who trusts. You keep extending the rope long after you should have tied it off. 2 weeks later, I'm at the kitchen table, Monday morning, coffee getting cold, and I get a call from my bank. My debit card was flagged. I call back, go through 3 menus, finally get a person, and she tells me, very carefully, that there is a legal hold on my accounts. I don't understand what she's saying at first. I ask her to repeat it. Legal hold, filed through the county court. Petitioner, Brittany Ann Schaefer Tate. I sat there with the phone against my ear, and the coffee going cold, and the lake outside my window looking exactly as beautiful as it always did, and I thought, she actually did it. She had filed for emergency conservatorship. The paperwork claimed I was a danger to myself, financially. It included a medical evaluation from a doctor named Lawrence Hull, diagnosing me with moderate cognitive decline with suspected early-onset dementia. I have never met Lawrence Hull in my life. I found that out later. In that moment, all I knew was that my accounts were frozen, my credit cards were declined, and I had about $400 in a kitchen drawer because I grew up poor enough to always keep cash somewhere, just in case. Just in case had arrived. I called Kevin from the kitchen floor. I'm not proud of that. I mean, I was sitting on the floor, back against the cabinet, because my legs stopped feeling interested in holding me up. He didn't answer. Brittany did. She sounded kind. That was the worst part. She said, "Dad, please don't be upset. This is just temporary. We're doing this because we love you. This is for your own good." for your own good. The phrase that has justified every act of cruelty ever committed by someone who wanted something from you. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I hung up the phone, sat on that floor, and I thought about Carolyn, about how she used to say that I was too quiet, that I held too much inside, that I needed to learn to fight louder. I used to tell her that loud wasn't the same as strong. She'd say, "Gene, sometimes people need to hear the noise before they respect the strength." She was smarter than me about most things. The preliminary hearing was 2 weeks after that. I walked in without a lawyer because I couldn't access my money to hire one. I walked in and sat at a table alone while Brittany had a full legal team. She cried during her testimony, actual tears. She talked about how much she loved me, how frightened she was watching me decline, how difficult this decision had been for the family. Kevin testified. He looked at the judge and said that sometimes his father didn't recognize him, didn't know who he was. He said that out loud in a court of law. I looked at my son and I felt something happen inside me that I don't have a clean word for. It wasn't rage exactly. It wasn't grief exactly. It was something that sat beneath both of those. Something structural shifting, like a beam in a house that's been quietly bending under weight for years, and finally, silently, gives. The judge gave Brittany temporary conservatorship, pending a full hearing in 90 days. I walked out of that courthouse in Charlotte, March wind cutting right through my blazer. No wallet that worked, no plan, no lawyer, no family standing beside me. And that is the exact moment I stopped being the quiet, trusting man who brought pound cake to Sunday dinners. I went home. I opened the kitchen drawer. I counted the cash, $420. Then I went to the filing cabinet in my office, and I found the folder I'd been keeping for 4 years. Every single cognitive test result Dr. Norman Pruitt had given me. Every evaluation. Every score. I sat down at my desk and I read through them. 94th percentile, 91st, 96th, 93rd. 12 evaluations over 4 years. All of them right there in black and white and signed. I held that folder for a long time. Then I thought, she doesn't know this exists. And that thought, that single quiet thought, was the first nail I placed in the frame of everything that was about to happen to Brittany Schaefer. She wanted a war with a man who spent his career making sure planes didn't fall out of the sky. A man who built systems where one error kills 300 people. A man who has never, in 62 years, needed to erase anything. She had 90 days before that courtroom reconvened. So did I. I spent the first 3 days after that preliminary hearing doing absolutely nothing. I mean that literally. I sat in my house in Cornelius, watched the lake through the window, made coffee I didn't drink, and let myself feel every single thing I'd been pushing down since that intervention in Kevin's living room. Rage, grief, humiliation. The specific kind of loneliness that comes from realizing the people who were supposed to protect you are the ones holding the knife. I let it all move through me because I learned a long time ago that emotions you bury don't stay buried. They rot. They poison the groundwater. And I needed my mind clear for what was coming. On day 4, I got up at 5 in the morning. I made coffee and actually drank it. I sat at my desk with a legal pad and a pen and I started writing. Not a journal, not feelings, a system. 34 years of aerospace engineering teaches you something important. When something goes wrong at 40,000 feet, you don't panic, you don't improvise, you assess, you prioritize, you execute. Emotions are data, not directives. Fear tells you something is at stake. Anger tells you a boundary was crossed, but neither one flies the plane. I was going to fly this plane. First problem, money. I had $420, no access to my accounts, and no way to hire a lawyer through traditional means. Brittany had calculated this perfectly. She knew that conservatorship battles are expensive. She knew that freezing my assets would leave me stranded. She was counting on me to show up at that final hearing alone, confused and defeated. She underestimated how many people owe me favors. I picked up my burner phone. Yes, I bought a burner phone. $47 at a gas station off I-77. Cash. I felt like a character in a movie my grandkids would watch. Except I don't have grandkids because Kevin married a con artist instead of a human being. First call. Dr. Norman Pruitt. Norman and I had known each other for 4 years, ever since my TIA scare. He's 68, semi-retired, the kind of doctor who still calls patients back personally and remembers their wives' names. When I told him what was happening, he went quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Eugene, I'm going to need you to say that again, because I'm not sure I heard you correctly." I told him again. The forged medical records, the fake diagnosis, the conservatorship, the frozen accounts, my son testifying that I didn't recognize him. Norman's voice changed. Got tight. He said, "I have tested you 12 times. You are sharper than half the 30-year-olds I see. Whoever wrote that evaluation is either incompetent or criminal." I told him I was leaning toward criminal. He agreed to testify, not just provide records. Testify in person, in court, with everything he had. He said, "I've been doing this job for 40 years, and I have never seen someone try to weaponize a dementia diagnosis like this. She picked the wrong patient." I hung up and crossed the first item off my list. Second call was harder. I have an old colleague from my Boeing days named Patricia Odom. We worked together in Seattle for 8 years before I transferred to Charlotte. Brilliant woman, retired now. But her daughter, Michelle Odom Foster, became a forensic accountant, the kind who works with law enforcement on fraud cases. I called Patricia first, explained the situation. She was furious on my behalf, which felt good in a way I'm not proud of. Then, she gave me Michelle's number. Michelle listened to my story. She asked questions, good questions, the kind that told me she was already building a mental file. Then she said, "Mr. Tate, I normally charge $400 an hour for this kind of work." My stomach dropped. I had that amount in total. It would buy me 1 hour. 1 hour wasn't going to expose whatever Brittany had built. But Michelle continued, "Elder financial abuse cases are personal to me. My grandmother went through something similar in Florida. I'll work your case pro bono. But I need you to understand something. If we find what I think we're going to find, this goes beyond your conservatorship hearing. This becomes criminal." I told her I understood. She said, "Good. Send me everything you have on Brittany Schaefer. Full name, date of birth, previous addresses, employment history, previous marriages." Previous marriages. I paused. I said, "She was married before. I don't know much about it. They divorced before she met Kevin." Michelle said, "Find out more." That's your homework. I hung up and wrote down 3 words on my legal pad. Who was he? Third call. The hardest one. My brother Walter. Walter is 65, retired from the Postal Service, lives in Huntersville, about 20 minutes from me. We've never been the kind of brothers who call each other every day, but we've always been solid. Holiday dinners, birthday cards, the occasional fishing trip on the lake. And he sat in that intervention. He sat there and looked at me with pity. He believed her. I almost didn't call. Something in me wanted to write him off, add him to the list of people who betrayed me, let the anger burn that bridge right down. But Carolyn's voice was in my head. She always liked Walter. She used to say that Walter wasn't quick, but he was loyal. That he needed time to see things, but once he saw them, he never unseen them. So I called. Walter answered on the second ring. He sounded uncomfortable immediately, like he'd been waiting for this call and dreading it. I didn't waste time. I said, "I need you to come to my house. I need to show you something, And I need you to actually look this time." Long pause. Then he said, "Jean, I know you're upset, but the doctors said—" I cut him off. "What doctors, Walter? What doctors have you actually spoken to? Because I have 12 cognitive evaluations from my neurologist, a doctor I've actually seen, and every single one shows I'm functioning in the 94th percentile. I will show them to you. I will let you read every page. And then you can decide whether Brittany's documents came from a real examination or whether she paid someone to fabricate them." Silence. Then Walter said quietly, "I'll be there in an hour." He showed up in 45 minutes. I laid everything out on the dining room table. Dr. Pruitt's evaluations, the dates, the scores, the detailed breakdowns of memory function, processing speed, executive function, everything documented, everything signed, everything real. Walter read through it all. He took his time. When he looked up, his face was different. The pity was gone. Something else had replaced it. He said, "Jean, I'm so sorry." I said, "I don't need sorry. I need you on my side." He nodded. Then he said something that made my blood go cold. "There's something you should know. Brittany told everyone you grabbed her arm during an argument, that you got physical, that she's scared of you." I stared at him. I had never touched Brittany. I had never raised my voice to her. I had never done anything except be polite and occasionally ask her to stop interrogating me about my finances. She had invented a threat narrative, a physical danger story, something to explain why the family needed to act fast, needed to protect themselves, needed to get me under control before I hurt someone. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from something colder. I said, "Walter, I need you to remember exactly who told you that, exactly when, and exactly what words she used." He nodded again. "I'll write it down." I crossed another item off my list. Now came the real work. The burner phone became my command center. I made calls from park benches, from the parking lot of the Cornelius Library, from the dock behind my house, at 6 in the morning, when the lake was still and the neighbors were asleep. Michelle, the forensic accountant, called me back within a week. Her voice was strange. "Careful," she said. "Eugene, I need you to sit down." I was already sitting. I told her to continue. She said, "Brittany Schaefer was previously married to a man named Craig Palmer in Nevada. They divorced 7 years ago. During that marriage, Craig's mother, Eleanor Palmer, was placed under a conservatorship." I felt my chest tighten. Michelle continued, "Brittany was named conservator. Eleanor Palmer died 18 months later. The estate was valued at approximately $400,000. Brittany received the majority of it through what appears to be a series of legitimate-looking transfers. But when I dug deeper, the documentation is thin, very thin." I asked what happened to Craig. Michelle said he tried to contest it after his mother died. By then, Brittany had already filed for divorce and moved to North Carolina. He couldn't afford to pursue it across state lines. He gave up. I sat there on my dock, watching the morning light come up over Lake Norman, and I understood something with perfect clarity. Brittany Schaefer was not a daughter-in-law who got greedy. She was a predator, a professional, someone who had done this before and gotten away with it, and was doing it again. And she had chosen me. I asked Michelle if she could find Craig Palmer. She said she already had. He lived in Reno. She had his number. I wrote it down. That call happened 2 days later. Craig Palmer answered on the 4th ring, suspicious at first. When I explained who I was and what was happening, he went quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Oh my God, she's doing it again." His voice cracked. He told me everything. How charming Brittany was at first. How she slowly turned his family against his mother. How she documented everything, twisted everything, made everyone believe Eleanor was declining when Eleanor was sharp as a tack until the day she died. He said, "My mother knew. She knew what Brittany was doing. She tried to tell me. I didn't listen. He started crying. He said, "Mr. Tate, please, whatever you're planning, make her pay. Make her pay for both of them." I promised him I would. The final piece came from an unexpected place. I had been looking into Dr. Lawrence Hull, the physician whose name was on the forged evaluation. Michelle ran a background check. He was a real doctor, licensed in North Carolina. But 18 months ago, he had been flagged by the state medical board for suspicious documentation practices. 2 other families had complained that evaluations bearing his signature didn't match their relative's actual condition. He was under investigation. Not arrested, not charged, but investigated. Brittany had found him somehow, found a doctor who would sign whatever she needed for the right price. Hull wasn't a medical professional. He was a vending machine for fake diagnoses. I now had Dr. Pruitt ready to testify with legitimate records. I had Michelle building a financial trail that led straight to fraud. I had Craig Palmer ready to fly in from Nevada and tell a judge that his mother died under the same playbook. I had Walter documenting every lie Brittany had told the family. And I had one more thing, something I hadn't told anyone about yet. 3 weeks before the final hearing, Brittany made a mistake, a small one, the kind of mistake that only matters if someone is paying very close attention. She filed paperwork to establish an LLC. She listed herself as the sole member. The LLC's stated purpose was asset management and estate services. She was setting up the pipeline, getting ready to drain my accounts through a corporate structure that would make the theft look like legitimate management fees. But she filed it too early, before the conservatorship was finalized, which meant she was so confident she would win that she started celebrating before the game was over. And I had a copy of that filing. The final hearing was in 3 weeks. Brittany thought it was a formality. Kevin thought his father was fading away. The family thought they were protecting me. They had no idea what was coming. I sat on my dock the night before I started making my final preparations. The lake was dark. The stars were out. Somewhere across the water, someone was playing music. Something soft and sad that carried over the surface. I thought about Carolyn, about how she would have handled this. She would have been louder, probably, more confrontational. But she also would have been proud of what I was building. Not revenge exactly, something more surgical than that. Justice, with teeth. The hearing was set for June 14th. Charlotte Courthouse. Judge Patricia Emery presiding. Brittany would walk in, expecting to walk out as my conservator, with full control of my house, my accounts, my life. Instead, she was going to walk into the most carefully constructed trap I had ever designed. And I spent 34 years making sure planes didn't fall out of the sky. I don't miss. June 14th arrived with the kind of perfect Carolina morning that felt almost insulting. Clear skies, 72 degrees. Birds doing their thing outside my window, like the world wasn't about to shift on its axis. I stood in my bedroom at 5:30 in the morning, staring at the gray blazer hanging on the closet door. Same blazer I wore to Carolyn's funeral. Same blazer I wore to that first humiliating hearing 3 months ago. Today, it was going to mean something different. I put it on, looked at myself in the mirror, 62 years old, a little thinner than I used to be, because stress will do that. But my eyes were clear. My hands were steady. Today, we finish this. I drove to Charlotte in silence. No radio. No podcasts. Just me and the road and the quiet hum of everything I had built over the past 90 days. Dr. Pruitt was meeting me at the courthouse. Donald Gentry, the elder abuse attorney who had agreed to take my case on contingency after Michelle connected us, was already there preparing. Craig Palmer had flown in from Reno the night before. He was staying at a Holiday Inn off Independence Boulevard. He texted me at 6 in the morning. Ready. Let's get her. I texted back, "Thank you, for your mother." He didn't respond, but I knew he understood. The Mecklenburg County Courthouse sits on East 4th Street in Uptown Charlotte. Big building, lots of glass. The kind of place that looks impressive until you realize how many lives get chewed up inside it every single day. I arrived at 8:15. Hearing was scheduled for 9. Brittany was already there. She stood in the hallway outside the courtroom with her lawyer, a polished guy in an expensive suit who looked like he'd never lost a case because he'd never taken one that wasn't a sure thing. She was dressed perfectly. Navy dress, modest jewelry, hair pulled back. The picture of a concerned, responsible family member. She saw me and smiled. Actually smiled. This soft, sympathetic thing that made me want to put my fist through the wall. 90 days ago, that smile would have made me doubt myself. Not anymore. Kevin was there too, standing a few feet away from Brittany. He looked terrible, pale, thin, dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't slept properly in months. Good. He should look terrible. He lied about his own father in open court. He said I didn't recognize him. He chose her over 38 years of me raising him, supporting him, loving him through every stupid mistake he ever made. I walked past both of them without a word. Donald Gentry met me at the courtroom door. "Everyone's in position," he said quietly. "Pruitt's inside. Craig Palmer's in the witness room. Michelle sent over the final documentation this morning." I nodded. "The LLC filing? Printed and ready. Judge is going to love it." I took a breath. Then I walked into that courtroom and sat down at the defendant's table like a man who had absolutely nothing to worry about. Because I didn't. Judge Patricia Emery entered at 9:03. Older woman, sharp eyes. The kind of judge who looked like she'd seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. Brittany's lawyer went first. Confident, smooth. He painted a picture of a loving family struggling with a difficult situation. A daughter-in-law who stepped up when others couldn't. A father-in-law whose decline was heartbreaking but undeniable. Medical documentation supporting immediate intervention. He submitted the forged evaluation from Dr. Hull like it was gospel. I watched Brittany dab at her eyes with a tissue. Watched her perform grief and concern with the skill of someone who had done this before. "Enjoy this. It's the last time anyone will believe you." Gentry stood up, calm, almost casual. "Your Honor, the respondent would like to call a witness." Brittany's lawyer frowned. "We weren't notified of any witnesses." Gentry smiled. "Rebuttal witness, responding to the medical claims just submitted." The judge nodded. "Proceed." The courtroom doors opened. Dr. Norman Pruitt walked in. He was carrying a folder, a thick one, the kind of folder that contains 4 years of meticulous documentation. Brittany's face didn't change, but I saw her lawyer shift in his seat, just slightly. The first crack. Dr. Pruitt was sworn in. He introduced himself. Board-certified neurologist, 40 years of practice, specialized in cognitive assessment and neurodegenerative conditions. Gentry asked him how long he had been treating me. 4 years. Dr. Pruitt said. "Mr. Tate came to me after a minor TIA. As a precaution, I recommended annual comprehensive cognitive testing. He has completed 12 evaluations under my care." Gentry asked about the results. Dr. Pruitt opened his folder. "Mr. Tate consistently scores in the 94th percentile for cognitive function in his age group. His memory, processing speed, and executive function are exceptional. There is no evidence of dementia. There is no evidence of cognitive decline. None whatsoever." The courtroom was very quiet. Gentry handed Dr. Pruitt the evaluation that Brittany's lawyer had just submitted, the one from Dr. Hull. "Doctor, have you seen this document before?" Dr. Pruitt examined it. His face hardened. "No, I have never seen this evaluation. I did not conduct it. The findings described here are completely inconsistent with every test I have administered to Mr. Tate over the past 4 years. This diagnosis is fabricated. I looked at Brittany. Her composure was cracking, just around the edges. Her eyes had gone flat in a way that told me she was calculating, recalculating, trying to figure out how this had happened. You thought I was confused. You thought I was weak. You thought I would sit there and let you bury me. Surprise. Gentry wasn't finished. Your Honor, we have additional evidence regarding the source of the fraudulent evaluation. He submitted Michelle's report. The investigation into Dr. Lawrence Hull. The State Medical Board complaints. The pattern of suspicious documentation. The fact that Hull was already under investigation for providing false cognitive assessments in exchange for payment. Brittany's lawyer objected, called it speculation, called it character assassination. Judge Emery looked at him with those sharp eyes and said, "I'll decide what's relevant. Continue, Mr. Gentry." Gentry called his next witness. Craig Palmer walked into that courtroom, looking like a man who had been waiting 7 years for this moment. He was 51, thin, nervous, but when he sat down and started talking, his voice was steady. He told them everything. His mother, Eleanor, the conservatorship Brittany had orchestrated, the documentation that appeared out of nowhere, the doctors his mother had never seen, the way Brittany slowly isolated Eleanor from everyone who loved her. "My mother tried to tell me," Craig said. His voice broke slightly. "She said Brittany was lying. She said she wasn't confused, that she was being set up. I didn't believe her. I thought it was the dementia talking." He looked directly at Brittany. "There was no dementia. My mother was fine until the day she died, and by then, Brittany had taken everything. $400,000. My mother's house. Everything my grandmother left her. Gone." Brittany's lawyer was on his feet. "Your Honor, this is completely irrelevant. My client's previous marriage has nothing to do with—" "Sit down," Judge Emery said. Her voice was ice. He sat down. Gentry submitted the final piece. The LLC filing. Brittany's new company, established 3 weeks before the hearing, was supposed to confirm her conservatorship. Asset management and estate services. Sole member, Brittany Ann Schaefer Tate. "Your Honor," Gentry said, "the petitioner established this entity in anticipation of gaining control over Mr. Tate's assets. This is not the action of a concerned family member. This is the action of someone who planned to systematically drain a vulnerable person's estate. This is elder financial abuse, premeditated, documented, and part of a clear pattern." The courtroom was silent. Judge Emery looked at Brittany, really looked at her. The way you look at something you're seeing clearly for the first time. "Mrs. Tate," she said, "do you have anything to say?" Brittany stood up. For a moment, I thought she might try to explain, might try to spin some new story, find some new angle. Instead, she said, "This is a misunderstanding. I was only trying to protect my father-in-law. Everything I did was out of love." Her voice was perfect, calm, sincere, and absolutely no one in that room believed her. Judge Emery ruled from the bench. Conservatorship petition denied. All financial restrictions on my accounts lifted immediately, and she was referring the case to the district attorney's office for investigation into fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. I watched Brittany's face as the words landed. Something shifted behind her eyes. The mask cracked completely for just a second, and I saw what was underneath. Rage. Pure, cold rage. There she is. There's the real person. She turned to Kevin, grabbed his arm, hissed something I couldn't hear. Kevin pulled away from her. He stood there in the courtroom, looking between his wife and his father, and I could see the war happening inside him. 3 months of believing her lies, 38 years of knowing me. He didn't say anything, but he didn't follow her when she stormed out. That was something. Outside the courthouse, the June sun was brutal. I stood on the steps and let it hit my face. Dr. Pruitt shook my hand. Craig Palmer hugged me, which I wasn't expecting. "Thank you," he said, "for finishing what I couldn't." I told him his mother would be proud. He cried a little. I pretended not to notice. Walter found me in the parking lot. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 months. "Gene," he said, "I don't know how to—" I held up my hand. "You're here now. That's what matters." He nodded. We stood there for a moment. 2 old men who had been through something neither of us had words for. The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks. Brittany was arrested on June 29th. The charges were serious: fraud, forgery, elder abuse, conspiracy. Dr. Hull flipped on her immediately, testified that she had paid him $15,000 for the fake evaluation and had approached him with what she called a whole system for targeting elderly victims. The investigation expanded. Other families came forward. 2 more cases in North Carolina, 1 in South Carolina. Brittany Schaefer had been doing this for almost a decade. Different states, different names, same playbook. Her sentencing happened in October, crisp fall day. The kind of weather we'd had at Kevin's wedding 6 years earlier. She stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit. No navy dress, no modest jewelry, no sympathetic tears. The judge asked if she had anything to say. Brittany looked at the courtroom, at the families she had destroyed, at the investigators who had finally caught her, at me, sitting in the back row. She said, "They were going to die anyway. At least I put their money to use." The courtroom gasped. I heard someone crying. I think it was Craig Palmer. The judge added 5 years to her sentence, 18 total. She would be 63 when she got out, if she got out. I watched them take her away. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt tired. The kind of tired that lives in your bones and doesn't leave. But I also felt something else. Something that had been missing for a long time. Peace. Kevin came to my house 3 weeks after the sentencing. He showed up unannounced, looking worse than he had at the trial. Divorced now, lost his job because he couldn't function. The man I'd raised had been hollowed out by someone he thought he loved. He stood on my porch and said, "Dad, I don't know how to apologize for what I did." I let him in. We sat in the living room, where Carolyn and I had spent 30 years building a life. Where Kevin had taken his first steps, where we'd opened Christmas presents and argued about politics and done all the ordinary things that make a family. I said, "You looked at a judge and said, I didn't recognize my own son. That's going to live inside me forever." He was crying. Really crying, the way he cried when he was 8 and his dog died. I let him cry. Then I said, "But you're still my son, and I don't abandon family. That's the difference between me and her." We sat in silence for a long time after that. The lake outside the window was still. The evening light was fading. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Maybe not ever completely. But it was a start. 6 months later, Sunday dinner, my house. Kevin was there. Jenna and Maureen drove in from Virginia and Tennessee. Walter brought his famous potato salad that nobody actually likes, but everyone pretends to. We sat around the table. There were awkward silences, wounds that hadn't fully healed, things we didn't know how to say to each other. But we were there, together, trying. I stood up with a glass in my hand. Everyone looked at me. I thought about Carolyn, about how she would have handled all of this. She would have been louder, more confrontational, but she also would have been proud of what I'd done, what I'd survived. I said, "Your mother used to say that family isn't about never falling down, it's about getting back up together." I looked around the table, at my fractured, imperfect, trying their best family. I'm still standing, and I remember everything. I raised my glass. They raised theirs. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like Eugene Tate again. Not a victim, not a case number, not someone else's mark. Just a man, sitting at his own table, in his own house, surrounded by people who finally understood what they'd almost lost. The sun set over Lake Norman. The food got cold because nobody wanted to stop talking. Kevin laughed at something Walter said, and for a second, he looked like the boy I'd raised before Brittany Schaefer ever existed. That sound, my son's laugh in my house, that was the real revenge.